when you picture the fall of the Berlin Wall, you probably imagine this one big planned moment of pure joy, right? But the real story? Well, it's way more chaotic. And honestly, a lot more interesting. See, the wall didn't just get torn down. It was more like the last domino to fall in this crazy chain reaction of pressure, protest, and, believe it or not, a massive bureaucratic blunder. Okay, so to really get how this all went down, we're going to look at the 6 key dominoes that led to the collapse. We'll start with what the wall was actually like, its brutal reality. Then we'll see the first cracks appear, watch the pressure build up on the East German regime, get to the accidental announcement that changed everything, relive that incredible night the wall actually fell, and finally take a look at what happened next, the legacy of that moment. Right. So to understand why the fall was such a huge deal, we have to start with the wall itself. This thing wasn't just a fence. It was engineered to be a symbol of control and death. And a lot of people thought it was, well, invincible, a permanent scar on the map. And the reality of it was just grim. We call it the wall, but it was actually 2 massive walls. And in between them, that was the death strip, a no-man's land filled with mines, guard dogs, and watchtowers, with orders to shoot on sight. For 28 years, this wasn't just a political line. It was a fortress designed to kill its own people if they even thought about trying to escape. So a structure like that, how does it even start to crumble? Well, as it often happens in history, it all began with things that seemed pretty small at the time, but they kicked off something that just couldn't be stopped. And you can really see that domino effect right here. It all kicked off with this pan-European picnic on the Hungary-Austria border. It was kind of this test to see what the Soviets would do. And when Moscow did nothing, thousands of East Germans just poured through. That created this huge refugee crisis, which led to that famous speech from the embassy balcony in Prague, where thousands more were told they could finally go to the West. What started as a trickle was fast becoming a flood. Okay, so with thousands now getting around the wall, the pressure inside East Germany was just becoming totally unbearable for the government. They were getting squeezed from the outside by this refugee crisis and from the inside by their own people, who were getting bolder by the day. So the regime tries to manage the situation by, well, swapping out the leader. The old hardliner Erich Honecker, he's out. And in comes this guy, Egon Krenz, who promises all these reforms. But here's the thing. Nobody believed him. The public just saw him as the same old story in a new suit, and the protests demanding real change, they just got bigger and louder. So by early November of '89, the government was completely trapped. Just think about it. You've got massive, peaceful protests filling the streets, your economy is about to go bankrupt, you try to create a new travel law and the public just laughs at it, calling it trash, and on top of all that, your so-called ally, Czechoslovakia, is furious and about to close its borders because of all the refugees you've created. The whole system was right at its breaking point. And this is where the story goes from a regular political crisis to something, well, almost like a comedy of errors. All that pressure we just talked about, it led to the accidental shove that knocked everything over. The now famous press conference on November 9th. The crazy thing is, the government actually had a plan. They were facing total collapse, so they drafted new rules to let people travel. But, and this is the important part, it was supposed to be orderly. You know, with paperwork and an official process, it was meant to be announced and rolled out in a controlled way starting the next day, November 10th. But the memo about how to communicate the plan, well, it seems that memo got lost. And this brings us to the main character in this drama, Günter Schabowski. Right before his daily press conference, someone hands him a piece of paper with the new travel rules on it. That's it. He wasn't in the meetings, he wasn't briefed on the details, he was just handed a note and shoved out there to face the world's media. What could possibly go wrong? Believe it or not, the press conference was almost over, and it had been pretty dull. But then, an Italian journalist, Riccardo Ehrman, speaks up. He asks about the travel laws. This forces a totally unprepared Schabowski to start shuffling through his papers and reading from this note that he barely understands himself. So after Schabowski sort of mumbles his way through all this bureaucratic language, another reporter yells out the most important question of the entire night. A really simple question that was about to get a world-changing answer. And this is the moment. Schabowski pauses, he glances down at his notes, which, by the way, did say it was for the next day, but he just missed it, and instead he utters the 5 words that accidentally made history. As far as I know, immediately without delay. That one mistaken phrase, immediately, without delay, was broadcast live on TV. And within minutes, the final dominoes didn't just fall, they came crashing down with a force that absolutely no one saw coming. What happened next was just a total breakdown of the state. The West German news, which of course everyone in the East was watching, starts blasting the headline, "The borders are open." So people just started flooding the checkpoints. The guards had no clue what was happening. They're making these frantic calls up the chain of command, but nobody's giving them any orders. It became pretty clear pretty fast that no one was going to take responsibility for ordering them to shoot their own citizens. And finally, at the Bornholmer Strasse crossing, this one guy, Lieutenant Colonel Harald Jaeger, facing this massive chanting crowd, just made the call himself. He told his men, "Open the barrier." The fall of the wall, that wasn't the end of the story. It was the start of a transformation that was so fast, so incredible. What followed was just pure history unfolding right before everyone's eyes. I mean, in the days after, people came from all over the world with hammers and chisels. They got the nickname Mauerspechte, wall peckers, chipping away pieces for souvenirs. And the speed of what happened next is just mind-blowing. In less than a year, just 339 days after one confused guy gave the wrong answer at a press conference, Germany was officially one unified country again. Just like that. But the legacy of all this is a bit more complicated than you might think. We celebrate the fall of the wall as this amazing moment of freedom, but a poll from 2019 showed a surprising number of Germans from both the old East and West who actually wished the wall was still there. It's just a reminder that bringing a country back together came with its own set of very real challenges. So, when you boil it all down, this whole incredible chain of events shows us that history doesn't always move in a straight line. Sometimes it just trips and falls forward. This massive world-changing moment was really a perfect storm. You had brave people demanding change, you had the media spreading the news like wildfire, and you had a government so broken it couldn't even tell its own spokesman what was going on.
The fall of the Berlin Wall was obviously a huge moment, but it was just one piece of a much bigger puzzle. The collapse of the entire Soviet Union was just around the corner, and you can keep exploring how that all went down right here in our playlist. And hey, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss our next explainer on how the Cold War finally came to an end.